We speak of kings like they are born to rule, but here in this city of whispers, kings are made of broken oaths and buried knives. In the old days when the city was new, long before the skyline rose in iron and glass, long before the streets choked on mortal dreams, there were 8 rulers, 8 monsters, 8 kings in all but name. They came from every corner of the broken world, from the glittering salons of Paris, from the snowbound frontiers of Sweden, from the drowned cathedrals of Amsterdam, from the ruined castles of fallen empires. 8 ancient predators, each with a house behind them, a lineage soaked in blood, ambition, and secret wars. They met not in the light but deep underground, in a chamber carved into the bedrock, where mortal footsteps could never reach. Only the cold understanding that survival meant sharing a city without tearing it apart. Dreadford was nothing then, a sprawl of muddy streets and whispered promises, but they saw what it could become. A sanctuary, a hunting ground, and so they agreed, barely. Each house would claim its domain, each duke would rule their kin, and above them, one would wear the crown to hold the peace in their names. The betrayer of House Ashkari was chosen. The vampires of the council fought to make Dreadford into something worthy of their hunger. But in those dark first decades, something worse stirred beyond the city walls. The Tower. Ancient vampires, priests of a blood cult who whispered that Nosferatu were not just rulers, but divine. The Tower sent agents into Dreadford, seducers, assassins, zealots, to turn the court against itself. It almost worked. For a time, Dreadford nearly fell. The houses teetered, blood ran down church steps and into the earth like a river. But the council united. They tore the Tower's agents apart. They burned them in the sewers. They drove the survivors back into the wilderness, where even monsters fear to tread. And so the Dukes of Dreadford stood together and drove the Tower out in a secret war no mortal ever glimpsed. That was when the council truly became a covenant of power. There were 8 rulers who carved the city with blood and promises. Francis Stephen of House Dracul, a warrior in cloth and steel who saw the hunger of kings and recoiled. He built industries and fleets, but left the court to its games, preferring to focus on the mortal world. The betrayer of House Ashkari, the first king, a mind like cold fire, a tongue of gold, a heart no one ever truly pierced. His name is forbidden now. Those who speak it do so only in whispers, and only when the doors are bolted shut. Maastricht of House Orlok, a Nosferatu who ruled the underground unseen and unspeaking, knowing every secret before it was spoken aloud. Justine de la Chapelle of House Strix, beauty sharpened as a weapon, desire molded into dominion. She sang Dreadford into the velvet noose, until the noose turned on her. The hermit of House Leviathan, a scholar turned soldier who dreamed of justice in a world that had none. He taught strength without cruelty, but found little place for mercy among monsters. Abrantes of House Volkos, a chieftain of old blood, who raised his house like a warband, fierce, loyal, untamed. They say the earth shook when Abrantes howled in battle. Adelaide of House Morrigan, where others ruled by fear or strength, she ruled by knowledge of the future and misdirection, weaving plans too fine to see until the blade was already at your throat. Lodewijk van der Hoeven of House Irkalla, a master of pacts and betrayals, who turned friendship into weapons sharper than any fang. He smiled as he bled you dry, and you thanked him for it. And for a while it worked, until it didn't. The king who first wore the crown forgot why it was given, and when he fell, he nearly dragged the whole city into the grave with him. It began with silences, meetings missed, commands sent by proxies, never face to face. The king grew secretive, distant, obsessed with forces deeper and older than even the court could understand. The wise grew uneasy. The loyal grew afraid. But it was already too late. One night, without warning, the Tower returned. Not as assassins, but as allies of the king. The betrayer opened the gates. He welcomed the Tower back into Dreadford and turned his fangs against his own dukes. The war that followed was not clean. It was not noble. It was blood spilled across marble halls. It was oaths broken at the stroke of midnight. It was brothers turning on sisters, sires on children. Dreadford became a city of funerals with no mourners, the houses shattered, and at the center of it all the betrayer ruled, cold, perfect, unfeeling, a king with no heart left to bleed, but not all knelt. Some fought, and from the ashes of betrayal, one rose higher than any other. Francis Stephen of House Dracul, the dragon who remembered what it meant to defend, not devour. He forged broken houses into a blade. He made war not for vengeance, but for survival. And in the end, it was Francis Stephen who struck down the betrayer. They say he did not gloat, he did not roar, he only wept once, and then turned his face away. The tower was driven out once more. The surviving houses, bloodied, leaderless, while it crowned Francis Stephen the new king. He accepted the crown. He appointed a new council, 6 dukes to rule in his stead. And then, Francis Stephen vanished into the depths of the city, never to be seen again. Some say he sleeps, some say he watches, some say even worse. Remember this, children of the night. The blood you drink today was paid for by those who trusted too much, and by those who trusted no one at all. The first of the new dukes wears a crown of mirrors, and every time he smiles, he dares you to believe the lie he's become. Pierre Dupont, born in Lyon to silk and silver, a mortal life of salons, laughter, and masked balls. But even among the decadent, Pierre was different. He didn't just attend the revels, he became them. To be in his presence was to forget yourself, to believe for a moment that the world was nothing but music and candlelight and beauty without consequence. It was at one of those gilded nights that Justine de la Chapelle found him. A boy too beautiful to be mortal, a heart too hollow to resist. She turned him, not out of love, but to craft a living reflection of herself. Bound by blood, molded by obsession. Pierre became the perfect jewel in Justine's crown. When the court was young, Pierre was its golden host. He wove salons of secrets and sins. He hosted masked balls where alliances were born and broken in a single whispered waltz. He birthed children, beautiful, dangerous, hollow-eyed, to populate Dreadford's social elite. For a time, House Strix ruled through laughter and longing. But then came the great betrayal, and beauty was no shield against treachery. Justine fell, burned to ash. Pierre survived, by charm, by cowardice, or by fate, none could say. He seized House Strix in the chaos, declared himself duke, tried to rebuild the shattered mirror his sire had left behind, but not all his bloodline obeyed. Yelena, his blood sister, rebelled, tore a part of the house away from him in a firestorm of art, anarchy, and defiance. Since that night, Pierre has ruled, but never uncontested. Today, he sits atop an empire of glass. The Grand Dupont hotels, cathedrals of decadence rising above the mortal skyline, fashion houses, blood banquets, and salons, each one stamped with his perfect smile. Mortals and vampires alike flock to him, seduced by the promise of beauty. Yet behind the marble statues and velvet curtains, there is rot. Pierre is a creature devoured by the image of what he once was. A duke who demands love, yet trusts no one. A prince whose kingdom is made of reflections, and reflections cannot bleed for him. Pierre Dupont is the most beloved man in Dreadford, and he would rather see the city burn than be forgotten. The second duke did not rise from velvet or gold. She rose from rage, Caroline Graves. Born in the poisoned gardens of colonial Georgia to a family of slave owners, raised to be a proper, daughter of cruelty and wealth. Taught to smile at auctions, taught to pray for the souls her family chained. But Caroline's soul was never silent. It howled. It broke itself against the bars. She tried to change the world while still trapped within it. And the world spat her out. The slavers called her traitor. The abolitionists could only see her surname. Alone reviled, she became the perfect vessel for a different kind of savior. The hermit found her, not on a battlefield, but in the ruins of her last broken rebellion. He offered her a choice: die forgotten, or be reborn, powerful enough to tear down the walls herself. Caroline said yes. She rose as one of the first children of House Leviathan, forged not by tradition but by conviction, a blade sharpened against injustice. When the court was young, she led quiet wars against the Tower's agents in the streets and sewers. She trained with her siblings the first generation of vampire enforcers, those who police their own kind. She taught that strength was not domination, but discipline. But even blades can break. The great betrayal shattered her world. The hermit, her sire, was destroyed. Her brothers fell. Caroline alone survived. She rose not because she desired power, but because someone had to bury the dead. Someone had to make the court fear the law again. She took up the mantle of Duchess. She took up the badge of Chief of Police. And she built a new House of Leviathan, one where justice is not a word, but a blade pressed to the throat of chaos. Today, Caroline Graves controls the mortal police force, loyal to her without even knowing her name. She is not beloved. She is not worshipped. But in Dreadford, when the sirens rise in the night, when the blood is scrubbed from the stones before sunrise, when the guilty vanish without a trace, it is her name that the darkness speaks. She is the blade that keeps the king's court from bleeding itself dry. The third duke does not rule with armies. Jacob Holloway. Born to parchment and ambition in the alleys of London, not into greatness, but into the machinery that makes greatness. Lawyers, merchants, men who carved kingdoms with pens instead of swords. From a young age, Holloway understood. Titles are illusions. Power is paperwork. Victory is hidden in the fine print. By the time he reached old age, he was one of England's most feared negotiators. A man who could make or unmake fortunes with a single draft of ink. And that, of course, is when Francis Stephen found him. Francis needed not a soldier. He needed an architect, someone who could weave mortal empires into vampiric dominion. He offered Holloway immortality, not as a reward, but as an investment. Holloway accepted. Turned at the brittle age of 82, he rose not reborn, but refined. A mind sharper than fangs. When the court was young and lawless, Holloway became its iron heart. He wrote the first blood laws of Dreadford, rights of feeding, rights of siring, rights of rule. He built the mortal judiciary into a quiet extension of vampiric will. He laid down the codes that made the court look civil, even as it rotted underneath. He did not shout orders. He wrote them into existence. But law is not loyalty. And when the great betrayal tore through the court, Holloway lost everything personal. Both his sisters fell in the chaos, torn away by treachery and tower blades. Francis Stephen won the crown, but Holloway was left to pick up the pieces. He did not mourn aloud. He did not weep. He simply rewrote the laws, colder, stricter, deadlier, and he assumed the seat of duke not out of hunger, but out of calculation. Today, Jacob Holloway controls the courts of Dreadford, mortal and immortal alike, the financial arteries that feed every house's coffers. He is frail in appearance, silver-haired, soft-spoken, but make no mistake, in Dreadford, death has many faces, and one of them speaks softly and signs your life away with a pen dipped in old blood. The fourth duke has no face, no voice that is truly his own. Spectre. In the oldest stories, he was a child of Maastricht, the original Duke of House Orlok, who ruled the tunnels with an iron claw. When Maastricht fell during the Great Betrayal, it should have been the end of House Orlok. No network of spies and whispers could live without a spider at its center. But then, Spectre spoke. I will not rule you. You will rule yourselves. And I will serve. And from that moment, the Nosferatu of House Orlok followed him. Not as a monarch, not as a tyrant, but as a mask they chose to wear together. Under Spectre's silent watch, House Orlok became something new. A parliament, where every Nosferatu votes. A city beneath the city, invisible, indivisible, indomitable. A military, when the tower breached the tunnels with their nightmare spawn. When monsters clawed from the dark, it was Spectre's RAT units that answered. When the walls bled, it was Spectre's blades that sealed the wounds. No one knows his true face. No one knows his true age. The fifth Duke was not forged in marble halls or blood courts. He was carved from the land itself. James McCoy, the rancher. Born in the Carolina backcountry, where storms and steel shaped men harder than stone, McCoy grew under open skies and iron laws. Protect your own. Hunt what hunts you. Bury your dead standing tall. By the time most men bent under age, McCoy stood taller. A rancher, a guardian, a patriarch to bloodlines stitched into the very soil. That was when Abrantes, the Iron Wolf of House Volkos, found him. Saw in him not ambition, but instinct. You guard your kin like a wolf guards the den, Abrantes told him. I will give you forever to guard them still. And McCoy accepted. As a vampire, McCoy became something rare. Not a predator for glory, but a sentinel of blood and earth. He loved his mortal kin fiercely, even as decades turned into centuries. He walked among them, sometimes an uncle, sometimes a cousin, always watching. And then, the breaking. A year before the great betrayal, a shadow crept into his dreams. Ash on the wind, blood on his hands, lies whispered by wolves with no faces. When he woke, his family was dead. Every man, every woman, every child he had sworn to protect, butchered by his own hands. Only one girl lived, and barely, her eyes the mirror of everything he had lost. In grief and madness, he turned her, hid her, and swore vengeance. Not against mortals, not against fate, against House Morrigan, those he believed had twisted his blood and broken his oath. Since that day, McCoy has hunted them like wolves hunt traitors, not for survival, but for justice written in blood. When the great betrayal tore the court apart, McCoy was unleashed. He fought like a beast in the ruins of the council. He avenged his house's fallen duke, Abrantes. He bled for Volkos until the ground itself drank of his fury. When the war ended, there were no elder wolves left to lead. Only McCoy. And every night he walks his territory on foot, alone, silent, daring the past to come for him again. The last of the new dukes was not born of violence. He was made by patience, precision, and promises kept beyond death. Adrian van Arden. Born beneath the wet grey skies of Amsterdam, a son of maps, of tides, of slow, relentless trade. A mortal life spent carving paths across oceans, privateer, smuggler, scholar of forgotten shores. What he never knew was that his greatest patron, the one who whispered strange commissions and stranger prices, was no merchant at all. A vampire of House Ashkari and master of the hidden lodges. For a lifetime, he served them without knowing he served the blood. And when his mortal body wore thin, when time crept up to claim the dutiful sailor, his sire stepped from the shadows and offered him eternity. Not as a gift, not as mercy, as a promotion. You have mapped the mortal world for us, but now map the eternal one. Adrian van Arden accepted. In the centuries that followed, Adrian rose faster than any might have dreamed. He was a father to his children, not a tyrant, not a master, but a true patriarch, binding them with loyalty, not chains. When the great betrayal shattered Dreadford, Adrian was sent to claim what remained. He entered the city not as a conqueror, but as a surgeon enters a dying man's chamber, with tools sharp enough to save or to sever. At first, the court feared him. An Ashkari blood mage, a living reminder of the betrayer. But Adrian offered no threats, only services, wards, contracts, and protections. And when the ghosts of the past stirred in the ruins of the library, he alone had the will to purge them with fire and spell. And so they sit, 6 dukes, 6 pillars, holding up a throne no one dares approach. When they meet, they gather in the amphitheater. 6 great seats arranged in a broken circle. The throne of skulls, black and empty, towering behind them, silent witness to their endless bargaining. The rules of the council are simple and lethal. No house may make war without council sanction. No house may starve the others of mortal blood. No house may break the theater that hides vampire rule from mortal eyes, and yet, they break these rules all the time. Not openly, never with banners or horns, but with 1,000 small betrayals, and above them all, Francis Stephen still hides somewhere beneath Dreadford. But he has not spoken in 100 years. The court rules in his name, but no one truly knows if the king still watches. Today, the King's Council is a clockwork machine soaked in blood. The King's Council rules the night, but they do not own it. No one owns the night. Not here, not anymore. Quite the contrary, Dreadford belongs to the night. It always has. It always will.